Psychology and Life, Chapter 8. In the previous two chapters, we have read about some topics related to social behavior and groups. We will now reflect on a set of social concerns with a wider scope, which are linked to each other and involve psychological aspects. These issues have to be understood and resolved at the level of the community rather than the individual. It is now known that besides affecting our physical health, the environment also influences our psychological processes and behavior. Human beings also influence the environment through their behavior, and some of these effects are demonstrated in stress producing environmental conditions such as noise, pollution, and crowding. At the same time, environmental stressors such as natural disasters are not under human control. Many damaging environmental effects can be reduced with the help of environment friendly behavior and a state of preparedness. We will read about the causes and consequences of some social problems such as aggression and violence, health and poverty and discrimination. We will also get a glimpse of how poverty and deprivation can make people victims of discrimination and social exclusion. An environment of poverty and deprivation has far reaching implications for developing human potential, social harmony, and mental health. Some ways of reducing poverty are also described. In addition, psychological aspects of health and the impact of television viewing on violence as well as other forms of behavior are explained. This chapter will show us how psychological understanding can be applied practically to aspects such as pro environmental behavior, the reduction of violence and discrimination, and promotion of positive health attitudes. Human environment relationship. Take a moment and try to answer these questions. Can a tree be your best friend? When it gets hot or when it is crowded, do people become more aggressive? If rivers are said to be holy, why do people make them dirty? How can one remedy the traumatic effects of a natural disaster such as an earthquake or tsunami, or of a man made disaster such as a poisonous gas leak in a factory? Compare two children who grow up in different physical environments, one in an environment filled with colorful toys, pictures, and books, and the other in an environment that contains only the bare necessities of life. Will the two children develop the same kind of cognitive skills? People might give different answers to these questions. A common idea that comes out of these questions is that the relationship between human behavior and the environment plays a special role in our lives. These days, there is a growing awareness that environmental problems such as noise, air, water, and soil pollution and unsatisfactory ways of garbage disposal have damaging effects on physical health. Less known is the fact that these forms of pollution, along with many other hidden factors in the environment, influence psychological health and functioning as well. A branch of psychology called environmental psychology deals with various psychological issues pertaining to the human environment interaction in a very broad sense of the term. The word environment refers to all that is around us, literally everything that surrounds us, including the physical, social, work, and cultural environment. In general, it includes all the forces outside human beings to which they respond in some way. In the present section, the discussion will center around the physical environment. Ecology is the study of the relationships between living beings and their environment. In psychology, the focus is on the interdependence between the environment and people as the environment becomes meaningful with reference to the human beings who live in it. In this context, a distinction can be made between the natural environment and the built environment. As the name itself suggests, that part of nature which remains untouched by human hand is the natural environment. On the other hand, where whatever has been created by human beings within the natural environment is the built environment. Cities, houses, offices, factories, bridges, shopping malls, railway tracks, road stamps, and even artificially created parks and ponds are some examples of the built environment which show how human beings have made changes in the environment given by nature. The built environment usually involves the concept of environmental design. The idea of design contains some psychological features such as first, the creativity of the human mind as expressed in the work of architects, town planners, and civil engineers. The sense of human control over the natural environment as shown in the building of dams to regulate the natural flow of rivers. Second, third, The influence on the kind of social interaction that takes place in the design environment. This feature is reflected, for instance, in the distance between houses in a colony, the location of rooms within a home, or in the arrangement of work desk and seats in an office for formal and informal gatherings. Different views of the human environment relationship. There is more than one way of looking at the human environment relationship, depending largely on how this relationship is perceived by human beings. A psychologist named Stokols 1990 describes three approaches that may be adopted to describe the human environment relationship. A. The minimalist perspective assumes that the physical environment has minimal or negligible influence on human behavior, health, and well being. The physical environment and human beings exist as parallel components. B. The instrumental perspective suggests that the physical environment exists mainly for use by human beings for their comfort and well being. Most of the human influences on the environment reflect the instrumental perspectives. C. The spiritual perspective refers to the view of the environment as something to be respected and valued rather than exploited. It implies that human beings recognize the interdependent relationship between themselves and the environment. That is, human beings will exist and will be happy only as long as the environment is kept healthy and natural. The traditional Indian view about the environment supports the spiritual perspective. We have at least two examples of this perspective in our country with the customs of the Bishnoi community of Rajasthan and the Chipko movement in the Uttarakhand region. By contrast, we also find examples of people damaging or destroying the environment, which is a negative instance of the instrumental perspective. The Bishnoi and the Chipko movement. The Bishnois, a small community in Rajasthan, value their trees and wildlife as much as their lives. Following one of the 29 rules given by the group, the Bishnois would do anything to prevent the destruction of trees by human beings, including hugging the trees. If they are threatened in any way, the destroyer cannot cut the trees without cutting these human bodies. Similarly, the forest cover in the Himalayan Uttarakhand region has been protected through the Chipko movement. Chipko literally means sticking to or hugging trees. The aim of this movement is to conserve forests, prevent landslides and soil erosion in the region, and to support the livelihood of the inhabitants. In the 1960s, when the forest department of the government was not quite successful in curbing the indiscriminate felling of trees in large numbers, people of the economically backward Uttarakhand region expressed their concern through the Chipko movement, which became stronger because of devastating floods in 1970. The Chipko movement's memorandum of demands included six principles. A. Only specific trees and vegetation suitable for a particular geographical region should be grown. B. Forest and landslides and soil erosion zones need to be identified and renewed. C. Those who have been customarily living near the forest and depending on them for survival should be given the right to do so. D. The contractor system for commercial timber exploitation should be abolished. E. Trees used by the villagers must be planted near the villages. And F. Village cottage industries based on manure forest products should be set up to provide jobs to locals for checking migration from villages. This movement has been recognized by environmentalists in India and abroad as well as by the government. Environmental effects on human behavior. The human environment relationship can be appreciated fully by understanding that the two influence each other and depend on each other for their survival and maintenance. When we focus our attention on the effects of the natural environment on human beings, we find a variety of environmental influences ranging from physical effects such as a change of clothing in response to climate changes to severe psychological effects such as serious depression after natural disaster. Some of the effects pointed out by psychologists are: first, environmental influences on perception. Some aspects of the environment influence human perception. For example, as we have studied earlier, a tribal society of Africa lives in circular herds, and that is in houses without angular walls. They show less error in a geometric illusion, the Muller Lyer illusion, than people from cities who live in houses with angular walls. Second, environmental influences on emotions. The environment affects our emotional reactions as well. Watching nature in any form, whether it is a quietly flowing river, a smiling flower, or a tranquil mountain top, provides a kind of joy that cannot be matched by any other experience. Natural disasters such as floods, droughts, landslides quakes on the earth or under the ocean can affect people's emotions to such an extent that they experience deep depression and sorrow, a sense of complete helplessness and lack of control over their lives. Such an influence on human emotions is a traumatic experience that changes people's lives forever and can last for a very long time after the actual event in the form of post traumatic stress disorder (PTSD). Third, ecological influences on occupation, living style, and attitudes. The natural environment of a particular region determines whether people living in that region rely on agriculture, as in the plains, or on other occupations such as hunting and gathering, as in forest, mountainous, or desert regions, or on industries, as in areas that are not fertile enough for agriculture. In turn, the occupation determines the lifestyle and attitudes of the residents of a particular geographical region. Compare the daily routine followed by a person living in a desert with one living in a mountainous region and with the one living on the plains. It has been observed that an agricultural society has to depend on the collective efforts of its members. Therefore, the members of an agricultural society develop an attitude of cooperativeness and consider group interests more important than the individual's wishes. They are also closer to nature, more dependent on natural events such as the monsoon, and may face situations in which the necessary natural resources such as water are in limited supply. Accordingly, the members of an agricultural society may become more fatalistic in their beliefs. On the other hand, highly industrialized societies feel less close to and less dependent on nature. Members of industrialized societies may value independent thinking, develop an attitude of competitiveness, and cultivate a belief of personal control over what happens to them. Human influence on the environment. Human beings also exert the influence on the natural environment for fulfilling their physical needs and other purposes. All the examples of the built environment expresses human influence over the environment. For example, the human being started building something called houses by changing the natural environment in order to provide shelter for herself himself. Some of these human actions harm and damage the environment and ultimately harm themselves in numerous ways. For example, human beings use appliances such as refrigerators and air conditioners that generate chemical substances, for example, CFCs or chlorofluorocarbons that pollute the air, land, and in the long run may be responsible for physical diseases such as some forms of cancer. Smoking is known to pollute the air around us, and the burning of plastic or metal articles has disastrous polluting effects on the environment. Cutting down trees or deforestation may disrupt the carbon cycle and the water cycle. This may eventually affect the pattern of rainfall in a region and increase soil erosion and desertification. Industries that discharge effluents and pump this untreated sewage into rivers seem to be unconcerned about the dangerous physical and psychological consequences of this kind of pollution. What is the psychological message in all of these examples? The message is that although most of the effects mentioned above are physical in nature, human beings have brought about these effects in order to exhibit the control and power over the natural environment. It is somewhat paradoxical that human beings are using technology to change the natural environment in order to improve the quality of their life, but in reality, they may actually be worsening the quality of life. Noise, pollution, crowding, and natural disasters are some examples of environmental stressors, which are stimuli or conditions in the environment that creates stress for human beings. Stress is an unpleasant psychological state which creates tension and anxiety in the individual. However, human reactions to these varying stresses may differ. Some of the damaging environmental effects are: first, noise. Any sound that is annoying or irritating and felt to be unpleasant is said to be noise. From common experience, it is known that noise, especially for long periods of time, is uncomfortable and puts people in an unpleasant mood. Exposure to noise for a long period of time may lead to hearing loss. Apart from that, noise has a negative effects on mental activity because it reduces concentration. Many of you might have experienced this when you try to study for your examination with neighbors celebrating a marriage with loud music. Three characteristics of noise have been found to determine its effect on task performance, namely intensity, predictability, and controllability of noise. Systematic research on the effects of noise on human beings shows the following. First, when the task being performed is a simple mental task such as the addition of numbers, noise does not affect overall performance, whether it is loud or soft. In such situations, people adapt or get used to noise. Second, if the task being performed is very interesting, then too the presence of noise does not affect performance. This is because the nature of the task helps the individual to pay full attention to the task and ignore the noise. This may also be one kind of adaptation. When the noise comes at intervals and in an unpredictable way, it is experienced as more disturbing than if the noise is continuously present. When the task being performed is difficult or requires full concentration, then intense, unpredictable, and uncontrollable noise reduces the level of task performance. When tolerating or switching off the noise is within the control of the person, the number of errors in task performance decreases. In terms of emotional effects, noise above a certain level causes annoyance and can also lead to sleep disturbance. These effects are also reduced if the noise is controllable or is necessary as a part of the person's occupation. However, continued exposure to uncontrollable and annoying noise can have harmful effects on mental health. From these observations, one may conclude that the stressful effects of noise are determined not only by its high or low intensity but also by the extent to which people are able to adapt to it, the nature of the task being performed, and whether noise is predictable and controllable. Pollution. Environmental pollution may be in the form of air, water, and soil pollution. Waste or garbage that comes from households or from industries are a big source of air, water, and soil pollution. Scientists know it very well that any of these forms of pollution is hazardous to physical health. However, there are some research studies that have shown indirect psychological effects of these forms of pollution as well. It has to be understood that in general, any form of environmental pollution may affect the nervous system because of the presence of toxic substances and to that extent influence psychological processes in some way. Another form of influence is seen in the emotional reactions to pollution, which in turn create discomfort and have consequences such as decreased work efficiency, lowered interest in the job, and increase in anxiety level. People do not like to live or work in a locality that is littered with garbage or has a constant foul smell. Similarly, the presence of dust particles or other suspended particles may give a feeling of suffocation and difficulty in breathing and may actually lead to respiratory disorders. People who experience this kind of discomfort cannot pay full attention to their work or be in a pleasant mood. Specific psychological effects of air pollution have been reported by some researchers. For example, in one part of Kolkata, the psychological reactions to the pollution were compared between a group living in an industrial area and a group living in a non-industrial residential area. Those living in the industrial area reported greater tension and anxiety than those living in a non-industrial residential area. In a study conducted in Germany, the presence of pollutants such as sulfur dioxide in the air was found to decrease the ability to concentrate on a task and lowering performance efficiency. Pollution caused by leaks of dangerous chemical substances can cause other kinds of harm. The infamous Bhopal gas tragedy of December 1984 that claimed many lives also left behind psychological effects because of the gas. Many of those who had inhaled the poisonous gas methyl isocyanate (MIC) along with other substances showed disturbances in memories, attention, and alertness. There can be harmful air pollution in the home and office environment, indoor environments also. For example, tobacco smoke pollution, that is pollution through cigarette, cigar, or BD smoking, can also cause psychological effects. Such effects are supposed to be more dangerous for the smoker. However, those who inhale tobacco smoke, passive smoking can also suffer the negative effects. One researcher found that inhaling tobacco smoke can increase the aggression level of individuals. The presence of polluting substances in water and soil are hazardous for physical health. Some of these chemicals can also have damaging psychological effects. The presence of specific chemicals such as lead can cause mental retardation by affecting brain development. Such toxic substances affect human beings through various routes, that is through water or through soil or by being absorbed by vegetables in vegetables grown in polluted soil. Another source of toxicity is household and industrial waste or garbage which are non-biodegradable. Common examples of such waste are plastics in plastics, tin, or any metal container. This kind of waste material should be destroyed or burned through special techniques, and the smoke should not be allowed to escape into the air that people breathe. In general, there is sufficient evidence to show that toxic chemicals in the air, water, and soil may lead to harmful effects not only on normal psychological functioning but may also cause serious mental disorders. Therefore, there is absolutely no doubt that all forms of pollution need to be curbed. Crowding. Most of us are familiar with crowds, which are large informal groups of persons coming together temporarily without any particular goal. For example, when a famous person suddenly appears on the road, people who are present in the situation at the time often collect around the scene just to watch this person. But crowding has a different meaning. It refers to a feeling of discomfort because there are too many people or things around us, giving us the experience of physical restriction and sometimes the lack of privacy. Crowding is the person's reaction to the presence of a large number of persons within a particular area or space. When this number goes beyond a certain level, it causes stress to individuals caught in that situation. In this sense, crowding is another example of an environmental stressor. The experience of crowding has the following features: first, feeling of discomfort; second, loss or decrease in privacy; three, negative view of the space around the person; and four, feeling of loss of control over social interaction. The psychological consequences of crowding in a country have been systematically studied by several Indian psychologists in many Indian cities such as Allahabad, Ahmedabad, Pune, Varanasi, and Jaipur, as well as some rural areas of Rajasthan. Some of these research investigations of crowding have been conducted in the psychology laboratory, but many more have been carried out in commonly encountered settings such as households, offices, traffic, public transport such as auto rickshaws, cinema halls, etc. The large population of our country makes crowding much more here than in other less populated countries. This feature has prompted some foreign psychologists to study the effects of crowding in India. It should be understood that the experience of crowding is brought about not merely because of the large number of persons as such, not merely because of the shortage of space. It is related to density, that is, the number of persons within the available space. For example, if there are 15 persons trying to squeeze into 4 seats in a railway compartment, each person is likely to experience crowding. Place the same 15 persons in a large hall and nobody experiences crowding. One may ask, is crowding always experienced in high density settings? And do all people experience its negative effects to the same extent? If you answered both questions by saying no, you are right. When we go to a fair, mela or a wedding ceremony, usually the physical setting has high intensity and we enjoy it in that form. After all, what is a mela or wedding ceremony if there are very few people? On the other hand, if there are many people sharing a small room, everyone feels uncomfortable. The stressful effects of crowding can be completely understood only when we look into its consequences. A summary is given below. Now we will see of this the effects of crowding and high density as reported in several research studies conducted in India and other countries. First, crowding and high density may lead to abnormal behavior and aggression. This was shown many years ago in a study of rats. These animals were placed in an enclosure initially in small numbers. As the population increased within this enclosed space, they started showing aggressive and unusual behavior such as biting the tails of other rats. This aggressive behavior increased to such an extent that ultimately the animals died in large numbers, thus decreasing the population in the enclosure. Among human beings, also, an increase in population has sometimes been found to be accompanied by an increase in violent crime. Two, crowding leads to lower performance on difficult tasks that involve cognitive processes and has adverse effects on memory and the emotional state. These negative effects are seen to a smaller extent in people who are used to crowded surroundings. Children growing up in very crowded households show lower academic performance. They also show a weaker tendency to continue working on a task if they are unsuccessful at it compared to children growing up in non crowded households. They experience greater conflict with their parents and get less support from their family members. The nature of social interaction determines the degree to which an individual will react to crowding. For example, if the interaction is on a happy social occasion such as a party or public celebration, the presence of a large number of persons in the same physical setting may cause no stress at all. Rather, it may lead to positive emotional reactions. At the same time, crowding in turn also influences the nature of social interaction. Individuals differ in the degree to which they show negative effects of crowding and also in the nature of these reactions. Two kinds of tolerance can be mentioned that may explain these individual differences, that is, crowding tolerance and competition tolerance. Crowding tolerance refers to the ability to mentally deal with a high density or crowded environment, such as a crowded residence, a large number of persons within a small room. People who are used to an environment containing many persons around them, for example, individuals growing up in a large family that lives in a small house, develop more crowding tolerance than people who are used to only a few persons around them. Our country has a large population. Many people live with large families in small houses. This might lead us to expect that Indians in general should have more crowding tolerance than people from other less populated countries. Competition tolerance is the ability to put up with a situation in which individuals would have to compete with many others for even basic resources, including physical space. Since there is a greater possibility of competition for resources in a crowded setting, the reaction The reaction to that setting would be influenced by the extent of tolerance for competition for resources. Cultural characteristics may determine the extent to which a particular environment is judged to be subjectively more crowded or less crowded. They may also affect the nature and extent of negative reactions to crowding. For example, in cultures that emphasize the importance of the group or collectivity over the individual, the presence of a large number of people in the surroundings is not taken as an undesirable state. On the other hand, in cultures that emphasize the importance of the individual over the group or collectivity, the presence of many other persons in the environment around us may take around us may make us around us may make us uncomfortable. Overall, though, regardless of whether the culture considers the group more important than the individual or the other way around, it is clear that in all cultures, crowding is experienced as being stressful. Personal space or the comfortable physical space one generally likes to maintain around oneself is affected by a high density environment. In a crowded context, there is a restriction of personal space, and this can also be a cause of negative reactions to crowding. We find many examples of people responding to the physical environment in terms of space. In social situations, human beings like to maintain a certain physical distance from the person with whom they are interacting. This is called interpersonal physical distance and is a part of a broader concept called personal space, that is the physical space we like to have all around us. One reason for the negative reactions to crowding, as described earlier, is a decrease in personal space. Personal space can vary between people, between situations and settings, and between cultures. Some average distances have been observed in certain cultures. Edward Hall, an anthropologist, mentioned four kinds of interpersonal physical distance depending on the situation. First, intimate distance up to 18 inches. The distance you maintain when you are talking privately to someone or interacting with a very close friend or relative. To personal distance 18 inches to 4 feet. The distance you maintain when you are interacting one to one with a close friend, relative, or even with someone not very close to you in a work setting or other situation. 3. Social distance 4 to 10 feet. The distance you maintain when the interaction is formal and not close. 4. Public distance 10 feet to infinity. The distance you maintain in a formal setting where there is a large number of persons. For example, the distance of an audience from a public speaker or a teacher in a classroom. It may be noted that these distances are maintained voluntarily, keeping in mind the comfort experienced by the persons involved in the interaction. However, when there is a shortage of space, people are formed to maintain much smaller physical distance from each other. For instance, in a lift or in a train compartment where there are too many people in such cramped spaces, an individual is likely to feel crowded, even though objectively the number of persons is not very large. In short, people react to physical People react to available space as a part of the physical environment when freedom of movement, the sense of privacy, and personal space cannot be maintained normally. The person experiences stress and responds negatively with a bad mood or aggressively and tries to leave the situation as soon as possible. The concept of personal space is important for the following reasons. First, it explains many of the negative effects of crowding as an environmental stressor. Second, it tells us about social relationships. For example, two persons sitting or standing close together are seen to be friends or related to each other when you visit your school library. And if your friend is sitting at a table and the place next to him is empty, you like to sit next to him. But if a person you do not know is sitting at the table, even if the place next to him is empty, it is unlikely that you will sit next to this person. Third, it gives us some idea about how physical space can be modified in order to reduce stress or discomfort in social situations or to make social interaction more enjoyable and fruitful. Here are some simple examples. Suppose the staff in your school have to decide how to arrange chairs when first there is a social event such as a cultural program. 2. There is a meeting between parents and teachers. And 3. Some guest speakers have been invited to address the students and teachers. Should the arrangement of chairs be the same in all three situations? You will find out more about what kind of seating arrangement people choose in non-crowded settings. What kind of seating arrangement do people prefer? Show the so natural disasters. Environmental stressors such as noise, various forms of pollution, and crowding are the result of human behavior. By contrast, natural disasters are stressful experiences that are the result of nature's fury, that is, the consequence of disturbances in the natural environment. Common examples of natural disasters are earthquakes, tsunamis, floods, cyclones, and volcanic eruptions. One finds examples of other disasters also, such as wars, industrial accidents, such as the leaking of poisonous or radioactive elements in industrial plants, or epidemics, for example, the plague that affected some parts of our country in 1994. However, wars and epidemics are human made events, although their effects can also be as severe as those of natural disasters. These events are called disasters because they cannot be prevented, usually come without any warning, and result in immense damage to human lives and property. Sadly, they also lead to a psychological disorder called post traumatic stress disorder (PTSD). Science and technology have now progressed sufficiently to make it possible for human beings to predict these events to some extent. Yet, the psychological effects of natural disasters need to be understood and remedied. What are the effects of natural disasters? First, they leave people poverty stricken, homeless, without any resources, usually along with the loss of everything they own. Second, the sudden loss of all their belongings as well as their dear ones leaves people shocked and stunned. This is sufficient to create a deep seated psychological disorder. Natural disasters are traumatic experiences that is emotionally wounding and shocking to those who survive the disaster. Post traumatic stress disorder (PTSD) is a severe psychological problem that results from traumatic events such as natural disasters. This disorder has the following features. First, the immediate reaction to a disaster is commonly one of orientation. People take some time to understand the full meaning of what the disaster has done to them. They may actually deny to themselves that something terrible has happened. Following the immediate reaction are the physical reactions. Two physical reactions, such as bodily exhaustion even without physical activity, difficult in sleeping, change in the eating pattern, increased heartbeat and blood pressure, and getting startled easily can be found among the victims. Three emotional reactions such as grief and fear, irritability, anger. Why should this happen to me? Hopelessness. I could do nothing to prevent this event. Depression, sometimes absolute lack of emotion, numbness, guilt, feelings for having survived while someone else in the family died, blaming oneself, and lack of interest in even routine activities. Four cognitive reactions such as worry, difficulty in concentration, reduced span of attention, confusion, loss of memory, or vivid memories that are unwanted for, or nightmares of the event. 5. Social reactions such as withdrawal from others, getting into conflict with others, having frequent arguments with even loved ones, and feeling rejected or left out. Surprisingly, very often in the midst of severe emotional reactions to stress, some survivors may actually help in the healing processes, having been through the experience yet survived it and staying alive. These persons may develop a positive outlook and on life, and with empathy pass on this attitude to other survivors. These reactions may last for a long time, in some cases throughout life. However, with proper counseling and psychiatric treatment, PTSD can be remedied at least up to a level where the victims can be motivated and helped to start life afresh. The poor women who have lost all their relatives and orphaned children who were survivors of natural disasters need special treatment and care. As in the case of the other environmental stressors, people react with different intensities to natural disasters. In general, the intensity of reaction is affected by, first, the severity of the disaster and the loss incurred both in terms of property and life; two, the individual's general coping ability; three, other stressful experiences before the disaster. For example, people who have experienced stress before may find it more difficult to deal with yet another difficult and stressful situation. Although we are aware that most natural disasters can be predicted only in a limited way, there are ways of being prepared to minimize their devastating consequences in the form of A, warnings; B, safety measures that can be taken immediately after the event; and C, treatment of psychological disorders. These measures, usually taken at the community level, are: first, warnings. If you have been listening to the radio in the recent past, you might have heard advertisements that mention what people should do when it is announced that some natural disaster such as a flood is likely. When cyclones or higher tides are predicted, fishermen are asked not to venture into the sea. Second, safety measures. Unfortunately, in the case of some natural disasters, such as earthquakes, even if prediction is possible, the events come too suddenly for people to be warned or to be mentally prepared. Therefore, tips are given beforehand about what to do when there is an earthquake. Three, treatment of psychological disorders. This includes self-help approaches as well as professional treatment. Often the very first step involves providing material relief in the form of food, clothing, medical help, shelter, and financial help. Counseling at the individual and group level is the next step. This can take many forms, such as encouraging the survivors to talk about the experiences and emotional state and giving them time for the emotional wounds to heal. According to some experts who deal with PTSD, one of the key attitudes should be developed in the survivor is that of self-efficacy. That is the belief that I can do it or I can come out of this phase successfully. Psychiatric help may be needed for those showing extreme stress reactions. Finally, rehabilitation in the form of employment and a gradual return to the normal routine should be undertaken at some stage. Follow-up of the victims and survivors is also needed in order to ensure that they have indeed recovered sufficiently from the traumatic experience. It may be pointed out that although pollution due to noise, air, and water is now here to stay, some practices on the part of the community can go a long way in making our precious environment less polluted and healthier for all of us. With regard to crowding, it is entirely a human made problem. Natural disasters, of course, are beyond human control, yet one can take the necessary precautions. Some thoughts regarding environment friendly behavior as are discussed uh, further. Promoting pro environmental behavior. Pro environmental behavior includes both actions that are meant to protect the environment from problems and to promote a healthy environment. Some promotive actions to protect the environment from pollution are: first, reducing air pollution by keeping vehicles in good condition or changing to non-fuel driven vehicles, stopping the practice of smoking, to reducing noise pollution by ensuring that noise levels are low, for example discouraging needless honking on the road or making rules regarding noisy music at certain hours. 3. Managing disposal of garbage sensibly, for example by encouraging separation of biodegradable garbage from non-biodegradable waste or composting of kitchen waste. These practices need to be adopted both at home. These practices need to be adopted both at home and in public places. Special attention has to be paid to the management of industrial and hospital waste. 4. Planting trees and ensuring the care, keeping in mind that those plants and trees should not be planted that have adverse health effects. 5. Saying no to plastics in any form, thus reducing toxic waste that pollute air, water, air, and the soil. 5. 6. Reducing non-biodegradable packaging of consumer goods. 7. Laws related to construction, especially in urban areas that violates optimal environmental design. Psychology and social concerns. If you ask someone to list the main problems that our society faces today, you will be fairly sure that two problems will be mentioned among others: poverty and violence. Both of these phenomena have noticeable effects on the physical as well as psychological health of people. It has to be understood that poverty is not merely an economic problem and violence is not merely a question of breaking the law. Rather, these problems can be resolved only if we examine their psychological causes. Psychologists have actively explored these issues and have focused on the causes and consequences of these phenomena. Each of these social concerns are: first, poverty and discrimination. Everyone agrees that poverty is a curse on society, and the more quickly we get rid of it, the better it will be for society. Some experts define poverty mainly in economic terms and measure it in terms of income, nutrition, the daily calorie intake per person, and the amount spent on basic necessities of life such as food, clothing, and shelter. Some other indicators are also used, such as physical health and literacy. Such measures continue to be used in some contexts. However, from the social and psychological points of view, economic and other physical aspects tell only a small part of the story about poverty. From the social psychological point of view, the most commonly accepted definition of poverty is that it is a condition in which there is a lack of necessities of life in the context of unequal distribution of wealth in society. Some authors add that the sense of deprivation and social disadvantage are additional features of poverty. A distinction between deprivation and poverty is that deprivation refers to the state in which a person feels that he has lost something valuable and is not getting something what he deserves. Poverty refers to an actual shortage of the resources necessary for living and thus can be somewhat objectively defined. In deprivation, it is more a question of perceiving or thinking that one has got less than what one should have got. Thus, a poor person may experience deprivation, but poverty is not a necessary condition for experiencing deprivation. The situation of the poor is worsened if they also experience deprivation. In reality, usually the poor also feel deprived. Both poverty and deprivation are linked to social disadvantage. That is a condition because of which some sections of society are not allowed to enjoy the same privileges as the rest of society. Social disadvantage poses an obstacle to the growth of these sections in a society. The caste system has been largely the source of social disadvantage, but poverty, irrespective of caste, has also played a role in creating social disadvantage. For the social disadvantage because of caste and poverty has created the problem of discrimination. Discrimination is often linked to prejudice. In the context of poverty, discrimination refers 2. The behavior that makes a distinction between the rich and the poor, favoring the rich and the advantage over the poor and the disadvantage. This distinction can be seen in matters of social interaction, education, and employment. Thus, even if the poor or disadvantaged have the capability, they are kept away from opportunities that are enjoyed by the rest of society. The children of the poor do not get a chance to study in good schools or get good health facilities and employment. Social disadvantage and discrimination prevent the poor from improving their socio-economic condition through their own efforts, and this makes the poor even poorer. In short, poverty and discrimination relate in such a way that discrimination becomes both a cause and a consequence of poverty. Clearly, discrimination based on poverty or caste is socially unjust and has to be removed. Every society wishes to do away with poverty. To proceed in this direction, it is important to know the psychological dimensions of poverty and deprivation and their major causes. Psychological characteristics and effects of poverty and deprivation. Considering that poverty and deprivation are among the glaring problems of our society, Indian social scientists, including sociologists, psychologists, and economists, have undertaken systematic research on the poor and deprived sections. Their findings and observations show that poverty and deprivation do have adverse effects on motivation, personality, social behavior, cognitive processes, and mental health. First, in terms of motivation, the poor have low aspirations and low achievement motivation and high need for dependence. They explain their successes in terms of luck or fate rather than ability or hard work. In general, they believe that events in their lives are controlled by factors outside them rather than within them. Second, with regard to personality, the poor and deprived have low self esteem, are high on anxiety and introversion, and dwell on the immediate present rather than being future oriented. They prefer smaller immediate rewards to larger rewards in the long run because in their perception the future is too uncertain. They live with a sense of hopelessness, powerlessness, felt injustice and experience a loss of identity. With 3. With respect to social behavior, the poor and deprived sections exhibit an attitude of resentment towards the rest of society. 4. Among the effects of prolonged deprivation on cognitive functioning, it has been found that intellectual functioning and performance on tasks such as classification, verbal reasoning, time perception, and pictorial depth perception is lower among the highly deprived compared to those who are less deprived. It has also been clarified that the effect of deprivation is because the nature of the environment in which children grow up, whether it is enriched or impoverished, makes a difference in the cognitive development, and this is reflected in cognitive task performance. 5. With regard to mental health, there is an unquestionable relationship between mental disorders and poverty or deprivation. The poor are more likely to suffer from specific mental illnesses compared to the rich, possibly due to constant worriness about basic necessities, feelings of insecurity, or inability to get medical facilities, especially for mental illnesses. In fact, it has been suggested that depression may be a mental disorder largely of the poor. Besides, the poor experience a sense of hopelessness and a loss of identity as though they do not belong to society. As a result, they also suffer from emotional and adjustment problems. Major causes of poverty. Poverty is sometimes caused by natural disasters such as earthquakes, floods, and cyclones, or man made disasters such as poisonous gas leaks. When such events take place, people suddenly lose all their possessions and have to face poverty. Similarly, Similarly, one generation of the poor may be unable to eradicate the poverty, and the next generation continues to remain in poverty. Apart from these causes, the factors responsible for poverty have been mentioned, such as there are some differences of opinion regarding the importance of these factors. First, the poor themselves are responsible for the poverty. According to this view, the poor lack the ability and motivation to put in effort and make use of available opportunities. In general, such a view about the poor is rather negative and does not help at all in making them better. Two, it is not the individual but a belief system, a way of life and values in which she is brought up, and that is the cause of poverty. This belief system, called the culture of poverty, convinces the person that he will continue to remain poor, and the belief is carried one generation one generation of the poor to the next. 3. Economic, social, and political factors together account for poverty. Because of discrimination, certain sections of society denied the opportunities needed for getting even the basic necessities of life. The economic system is made to grow in a disproportionate way through social and political exploitation so that the poor are left out of the race. All these factors can be summed up in the idea of social disadvantage, because of which the poor experience social injustice, deprivation, discrimination, and exclusion. The geographical region in which one lives is said to be a significant cause of poverty. For example, people living in regions such as deserts that have a shortage of natural resources and a harsh climate such as extreme heat or cold end up being poor. This factor cannot be controlled by human beings. However, can be made to help people in such regions to find alternative means of livelihood and to provide special facilities for their education and employment. The poverty cycle is another important cause of poverty. It explains why poverty tends to continue among the same sections of society. Poverty begets poverty, beginning with a low income and lack of resources. The poor go through low health and nutrition, lack of education, and lack of skills. This leads to low employment opportunities, which in turn continue the low income and condition and low health and nutritional status. The resulting lowered motivation level only makes the situation worse. The cycle starts and continues again. Thus, the poverty cycle involves an interaction between the factors mentioned above and results in declining individual motivation, hope, and sense of control. The only way to tackle the problems associated with poverty and deprivation is to work actively as well as earnestly towards the removal or reduction of poverty. Some measures in that direction our first measures for poverty alleviation. Several steps are being taken by the government and other groups to work towards alleviation or reduction of poverty and its negative consequences. Breaking the poverty cycle and helping the poor to attain self-sufficiency. Initially, financial relief, medical, and other facilities may have to be provided to the poor. Care should be taken to see that this financial and other help does not make the poor dependent on these sources for their livelihood. To creating a context for making the poor take responsibility instead of blame for their poverty. This step will help them to regain a sense of hope, control, and identity. 2. 3. Providing education and employment opportunities. Following the principle of social justice, this step may help the poor to discover their own abilities and skills, thus enabling them to come up to the level of other sections of society. This will also help in reducing crime and violence by reducing frustration and by encouraging the poor to earn their livelihood through legal rather than illegal means. 4. Measures for improved mental health. Many of the poverty reduction measures help to improve the physical health of the poor, but their mental health still remains a problem to be tackled effectively with regard awareness. With greater awareness of this problem, it is hoped that more attention will be paid to this aspect of poverty. 5. Steps are empowering the poor through the measures mentioned above. The poor should be made more powerful and capable of living independently and with dignity without depending on the help given by the government or other groups. The concept of Antyodaya or the rise of the last person society, that is the poorest or the most disadvantaged, has helped a large section of the poor to get uplifted to a better economic condition than they have experienced earlier. Under Antyodaya programs, there is provision for health facilities, nutrition, education, and training for employment, all the areas in which the poor need help. Many of these programs are more active in the rural than in urban regions, as the rural poor have been fewer have even fewer facilities than the urban poor. In addition, the poor are encouraged to start their own small-scale businesses. Initial capital for these ventures is provided through small loans or microcredit facilities. These facilities similar to the idea of the Grameen Bank in Bangladesh. Following the 73rd Amendment of the Constitution, the aim is to give more power to people for their development through decentralized planning and through people's participation. Action Aid, an international group dedicated to the cause of the poor, has goals of making the poor more sensitive to their rights to equality and justice and ensuring for them adequate nutrition, health, and facilities for education and employment. The Indian branch of this organization has been working for poverty alleviation in our country. These measures cannot be expected to have magical effects in a short time, but if these efforts towards poverty alleviation are continued in the right spirit and right direction, we may see positive results in the very near future. Aggression, violence, and peace. Aggression and violence are among the major problems in today's society, and they cover a wide range of behaviors from ragging of newcomers in education institutes through child abuse, domestic violence, murder and rape to riots and terrorist attacks. Psychologists use the term aggression to refer to any behavior by one persons that is intended to cause harm to another persons it can be demonstrated in actual action or through the use of harsh words or criticism or even hostile feelings against others. Forceful destructive behavior towards another person or object is described as violence. Some psychologists distinguish aggression from violence by pointing out that aggressive behavior involves the intention to harm or injure another person, whereas violence may or may not involve such an intention. For example, burning buses or other public property during a riot is called violence as well as aggression. But suppose you see a person kicking a motorbike violently, his intention may be only to start the vehicle, and therefore this act will not be considered a case of aggression. On the other hand, the person may also perform the violent act in order to damage the vehicle because it belongs to a person he dislikes. In this case, because harm was intended, the act would be called a case of aggression. A distinction is also made between instrumental aggression and hostile aggression. In instrumental aggression, the act of aggression is meant to obtain a certain goal or object. For example, a bully slaps a new student in school so that he can snatch the newcomer's chocolate. Hostile aggression is that which is shown as an expression of anger towards the target with the intention of harming him, even if the aggressor does not wish to obtain anything from the victim. For example, a criminal may beat up a person in the community for mentoring his name to the police. Causes of aggression. Social psychologists have explored the issue of aggression for several years and have come up with the following views about the causes of aggression. First, inborn tendency. Aggressiveness is an inborn tendency among human beings as it is in animals. Biologically, this inborn tendency may be meant for self-defense. Two physiological mechanisms. Aggression could be could also be indirectly triggered by physiological mechanisms, especially by the activation of certain parts of the brain that plays a role in emotional experience. A general physiological state of arousal or feeling activated might often be expressed in the form of aggression. There could be several factors that cause arousal. For example, as was seen earlier in this chapter, aggression can result from a sense of crowding, especially in hot and humid weather. 3. Child rearing. The way an individual is brought up often influences her aggressiveness. For example, children whose parents use physical punishment and end up becoming more aggressive than children whose parents use other disciplinary techniques. This could be because the parents has set an example of aggressive behavior which the child imitates. It could also be because physical punishment makes the child angry and resentful. As the child grows up, he expresses his anger through aggressive behavior. 4. Frustration. Aggression is an expression and consequence of frustration, that is an emotional state that arises when a person is prevented from reaching a goal or attaining an object that he wants. The person may be very close to the goal and yet does not attain it. It has been found that people in frustrated situations show more aggression than those who are not frustrated. In one of the experiments conducted to examine the effects of frustration, children were prevented from getting some attractive toys that were visible through a screen. As a result, these children were found to be more destructive in play than those children who were allowed access to toys. An American An American psychologist, John Dollard, along with his collaborators, conducted research specifically to examine the frustration aggression theory. This theory proposes that it is frustration that leads to aggression, and expected frustrated persons to demonstrate more aggression than non-frustrated persons. Moreover, such aggression was often shown towards a weaker person who was unlikely or unable to react to the aggression. This phenomenon has been called displacement. Often it is observed that members of a majority group in society may be prejudiced against members of a minority group and may show aggressive behavior towards a minority group member, such as using abusive language or even physically assaulting the minority group member. This may be a case of displaced aggression arising out of frustration. Later on, as more information was gathered about the causes of aggression, it became clear that frustration is not the only or even a major cause of aggression. Observations showed that first, being frustrated does not necessarily make a person aggressive, and too many other situation factors may lead to aggression. Some of these situation factors are First, learning. Among human beings, aggression is largely the result of learning rather than an expression of an inborn tendency. Learning of aggression can take place in more than one mode. Individuals may exhibit aggression because they have found it rewarding. For example, hostile aggression allows the aggressive person to get what he wants. This would be a case of learning through direct reinforcement. Individuals also learn to be aggressive by observing others showing aggression. This is a case of learning through modeling. To observing an aggressive model. Many such studies conducted by psychologists such as Albert Bandura and his collaborators show the role of modeling in learning aggression. If a child observes aggression and violence on television, he may start imitating that behavior. Without doubt, violence and aggression shown on television and the film media have a powerful influence on the viewers, especially the children. But the question is, does merely seeing violence on the television make a person aggressive, or are there other situation factors that actually make a person show aggression? The answer is obtained through information about specific situational factors. Anger provoking action by others. If a person watches a movie that shows violence and is then made to feel angry, for example, through insults or threats, physical aggression or dishonesty by another person, he may be more likely to show aggression than if he is not made to feel angry. In studies that tested the frustration aggression theory, provoking the person and making him angry was one way of inducing frustration. Availability of weapons of aggression. Some researchers have found that observing violence leads to a greater likelihood of aggression on the part of the observer only if weapons of aggression like a stick, pistol, or knife are easily available. Personality factors. When interacting with people, we notice that some of them seem to be naturally more hot tempered and show more aggression than others. We may conclude that aggressiveness is thus a personal quality. It has been observed that people who have very low self esteem and feel insecure may behave aggressively in order to boost their ego. Likewise, people who have very high self esteem may also show aggression because they feel that others do not place them at the high level at which they have placed themselves. Cultural factors. The culture in which one grows up can teach its members to be aggressive or not by encouraging and praising aggressive behavior or discouraging and criticizing such behavior. Some tribal communities are traditionally peace loving, whereas others see aggression as necessary for survival. Reducing aggression and violence. Some strategists, knowing that aggression can have more than one cause, can anything be done to reduce aggression and violence in societies. Some of the remedies suggested for curbing violence and aggression are described. It may not be easy to ensure a society or environment that is free from frustrating situations. However, the learning of aggression can be curtailed by creating the appropriate attitude towards a general problem of growing aggression. First, parents and teachers should be especially careful not to encourage or reward aggression in any form. The use of punishment to bring about discipline also needs to be changed to opportunities to observe and imitate the behavior of aggressive models should be reduced drastically. Portraying aggression as heroic behavior should be particularly avoided because this may set the stage for learning through observation. 3. Poverty and social injustice may be a prominent cause of aggression because they can cause frustration in certain sections of society. Implementing social justice and equality in society may help in reducing frustration levels and thereby curb aggressive tendencies at least to some extent. 4. Apart from these strategies at the level of the community or society, it is important to inculcate a positive attitude towards peace. We should not only reduce aggression but should also actively develop and maintain peace. Our own cultural values have always favored peaceful and harmonious coexistence. The father of our nation, Mahatma Gandhi, gave the world a new view on peace that was not simply the absence of aggression. This was the idea of nonviolence, which he himself practiced throughout his life. Mahatma Gandhi on nonviolence. Why does nonviolence work? Nonviolence is an active force of the highest order. It is the sole force of the power of the Godhead within us. Imperfect man cannot grasp the whole of that essence. He would not be able to bear its full blaze, but even an infinitesimal fraction of it, when it becomes active within us, can work wonders. I am not a visionary. I claim to be a practical idealist. The religion of non-violence is not meant for the rishis or saints, it is meant for the common people as well. Non-violence is the law of our species, as violence is the law of the brute. The dignity of a man requires obedience to a higher law, to the strength of the spirit. Non-violence does not require any outside or outward training. It simply requires the will in not to kill but even in retaliation, and the courage to face death without revenge. This is no sermon on ahimsa, but cold reason and the statement of a universal law. Given the unquenchable faith in the law, no provocation should prove too great for the exercise of forbearance. With Satya, truth combined with Ahimsa, non-violence, you can bring the world under your feet. Satyagraha, in its essence, is nothing but the introduction of truth and gentleness in the potential. It's that is national life by its very nature. Non-violence cannot seize power, nor can that be its goal. However, non-violence can do more. It can effectively control and guide power without capturing the machinery of government. That is its beauty. Health. Our understanding about health and well being has undergone a major change in recent times. It is now conceded that various health outcomes are not only a function of disease but the way we think and behave. This finds reflection in the definition of health provided by the World Health Organization WHO, which includes biological, psychological, and social aspects of health. It focuses not only on physical but also on mental and spiritual aspects of health. We concern ourselves with physical health in this section, as we have already read about mental health in the previous chapters. Health and illnesses are a matter of degree. One may be suffering from a physically disabling disease but may be quite healthy otherwise. You may recall the names of Baba Amteow, Stephen Hawkins, both of whom suffer from crippling diseases but have made great contributions in their fields. We also find that people differ across cultures in their thinking about when and how people fall ill, and therefore in the models which they use in prevention of diseases and promotion of health. There are traditional cultures like Chinese, Indian, and Latin American which hold that good health results from the harmonious balance of various elements in the body, and in health results when such a balance is lost. On the contrary, the Western cultures view health as a result of fully functioning machine which has no blockage. The different systems of medicine developed in different cultures are based on these models. There is another fact that you may want to know. The World Health Reports by the WHO show that in developing countries such as in Asia, Africa, and Latin America, more people die due to communicable diseases including HIV, AIDS, tuberculosis, TB, malaria deficiencies in the developed countries. The leading causes are various cardiovascular diseases, cancers, and psychiatric disorders. Such differences may be explained in terms of how these societies are economically and socially structured and the psychological underpinnings. At the individual level, psychologists point to various factors such as health related cognitions, including attitudes and beliefs, behaviors, and social factors which are associated with physical well being or illness. A. Cognitions. You may have observed how some people are quick to seek doctors' help while others do not if they are suffer from such symptoms as nausea, called cold, diarrhea, smallpox, etc. The variations seeking help are due to differences in mental representations people make relating to disease, its severity, and the causes of disease. One may not seek doctor's help for a cold if one attributes it to eating curd, or for leprosy or smallpox if these are attributed to God's annoyance. The level of awareness or information about disease and beliefs about how it is caused and about possible ways of relieving the distress or improving health affect help seeking behavior as well as sticking to a doctor's regimen. Another Another factor which influences our help seeking from a doctor is the perception of pain, which is a function of personality, anxiety, and social norms. B. Behavior. Psychologists have found strong evidence which shows that behaviors we engage in and our lifestyles greatly influence health. People differ greatly in terms of such behavioral risk factors as smoking or tobacco use, alcohol and drug abuse, and unsafe sexual behavior, diet and physical exercise. It is well accepted now that such behaviors are associated with the incidence of coronary heart disease, CHT, cancer, and HIV/AIDS, besides many other diseases. A new discipline called behavioral medicine has emerged which seeks to alleviate distress due to diseases through modification in behavior. See social and cultural factors. There is now a growing body of research which shows that Social and cultural differences may influence our physiological responses and may not be the same across all cultures. For instance, the relationship between hostility and anger and CHT is not found to be the same in all cultures. For example, in India and China, while interaction between culture and physiological responses requires more evidence, social and cultural norms associated with roles and gender, etc., greatly influence our health behavior. In Indian society, medical advice by or for a female is often delayed because of various reasons they are less valued or because of the belief that they are hearty or the same shame associated with the disease. Impact of television on behavior. There is no doubt that television has been a useful product of technological progress. However, from the point of its psychological impact on human beings, both positive and negative effects have been observed. Many research studies have inquired into the effects of television viewing on cognitive processes and social behavior, especially in Western cultures. Their findings show a mixed impact. Most of the research studies have been carried out on children because they are seen as being more vulnerable to the impact of television than adults. First, television provides a large amount of infotainment in an attractive form and in the visual mode, for which it became a powerful medium of instruction. At the same time, because the programs are attractive, children spend huge amounts of time watching them. This reduces their habit of reading and writing and also their outdoor activities such as playing. Second, television watching may have an effect on children's ability to concentrate on one target, their creativity and ability to understand, and also their social interactions. On one hand, there are excellent programs that emphasize positive interpersonal attitudes and provide useful factual information teaching children how to design and construct certain objects. On the other hand, these programs may distract young viewers and interfere with their ability to concentrate on one target. Third, about 40 years ago, a serious debate was raised in the US and Canada regarding the effect of television viewing on aggressiveness and violence among the viewers, especially children. As discussed earlier, in the context of aggression, the results of research showed that watching violence on television was indeed linked to a greater aggressiveness in the viewers. If the viewers were children, they tended to imitate what they saw. They were not mature enough to think of the consequences of such behavior. However, some other studies pointed out that merely watching violence on the television does not make children more aggressive. Other factors need to be present in the situation. Other research findings show that watching violence may actually reduce the natural aggressive tendency of the viewers. What is bought, what is what is bottled up get an outlet and thus cleans the system like a choked drain pipe being cleaned. This process is called catharsis. Both in the case of adults as well as children, it is said that a consumerist attitude has developed, and this is due to television watching numerous products advertised, and it is very natural for the viewer to get carried away. No matter how these results are interpreted, there seems to be sufficient evidence to pose a warning to unlimited television watching. Summarize Summarizing the chapter, first we take renewable and non-renewable resources from the physical environment to meet the needs of growing population. Rapid industrialization and human consumption. Undesirable human activities have altered the conditions in the environment that have resulted in pollution, noise, crowding, and intensified the occurrence of natural disasters. The environmental crisis and their solutions can be understood through transactional and traditional Indian approach. 3. Pollution adversely affects our mental and physical health and psychological processes. 4. Noise also adversely affects our thinking, memory, and learning. The elevated sound levels can cause permanent hearing loss, increased heartbeat, blood pressure, and muscle tension. 5. Crowding is the psychological feeling of not having enough space available. Crowding negatively affects cognitive performance, interpersonal relationships, and physical and mental health. 6. A natural disaster disrupts the normalcy within a society and causes damage, destruction, and human suffering. In the aftermath of a disaster, post traumatic stress disorder is the most common feature. Counseling the disaster affected people and creating scope for collective attitudes can reduce such stress. Also, preparedness of individ- individuals and communities to respond rapidly and effectively to possible disasters can lessen the adverse effects. 7. Pro-environmental behavior includes both actions that are meant to protect the environment from problems and to promote a healthy environment. Next, social and psychological concerns arise out of vexed problems that affect a large segment of people in a society. 9. Lower economic status entails poverty. It relates to deprivation and disadvantage. It adversely affects cognitive performance, personality, and social behavior. Many programs are being implemented for social and economic empowerment of the poor. 10. Aggression and violence are among the major problems in today's society. The learning of aggression can be curtailed by creating the appropriate attitude towards a general problem of growing aggression. 12. Health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well being. The challenge before the nation is to reduce communicable diseases like diarrhea, tuberculosis, and HIV/AIDS, and non communicable diseases like anemia, cancer, diabetes, and stress related disorders. Positive lifestyle habits can reduce positive emotions, physical fitness, and reduce the health problems. Both positive and negative effects of television viewing on human behavior have been observed. Most of the research studies have been carried out on children because they are seen as being more vulnerable to the impact of television than adults. Thank you.